Hey guys, so I was going through my old project and I found this website here I did back in college as a class assignment to make a department website. So I was going through it and I noticed some obvious mistakes, and I wanted to go and fix those and explain to you my thought process. So I'm not going to be like doing a whole overhaul, rethinking like the user experience and whatnot. I just want to fix like some obvious UI UX issues and tell you my thought process. So yeah, the first thing I noticed was the font. The font was, I was using a serif font, system serif font called Georgia, and I thought this was a very boring, I guess, font. Normally system fonts are not the best things to use when you're making a serious design, unless it's like a requirement. Maybe you want to make sure that the website or the application looks the same on all products without needing any extra time downloading like a font from Google or somewhere. So yeah, but then again, even if you have to do that, normally it's a good idea when you're making UI to just use sans serif fonts. They are much easier to make work when it comes to UI and UI design. Don't get me wrong, if you're a talented designer, serif fonts can look very cool and very polished and very luxurious in some cases. So yeah, but if you are just starting out, it's normally just a good idea to go with sans serif font. So yeah, that's the first thing I did. I picked Poppins, which is a popular sans serif font. You can find it on Google Fonts. So yeah, that was the first thing I did. So from there, you notice I'm using that serif font to here. Now you see sans serif fonts, like I said, are popular in UI, so they can have this feeling of being quite familiar. So yeah, the next thing I noticed was this logo here. It didn't make sense to me from a usability standpoint because it was just the words computer science IFM, and I wanted it to be able to work well if it's going to be used in the university website. I wanted it to feel like it was going to be part of the existing website. So one thing I wanted to introduce here was introduce the university logo somewhere, and then also indicate that this is the department website. So you notice there now I have a logo, the university logo, and then a little slash here, and then BCS. So not exactly the biggest mastermind plan to improve that, but I felt like it was a little necessary detail to make it usable a little bit better. So if somebody wanted to go back to the university website, the main university website, they would just click the university logo there, and if they are in one of the internal pages for this department website, they can just come and click the BCS there, and then they'll be returned to this homepage. So yeah, you notice I removed the green background here. I wasn't really doing much, to be honest, and it wasn't really consistent with the existing website color. The existing color, their logo has this purple thing going on in it there, maybe indigo, maybe violet, not really sure. So I decided to use that in all the places where I decided to use colors. So for instance, in the active navigation item here, I decided to also use the color, the main color from their logo there, instead of that green that was really coming from nowhere. So yeah, the next thing you'll notice I merged those two, the logo and the navigation. This is just a common thing to do in websites, to have the logo on the left side and the navigation at the right. So yeah, I just moved on to made that change quickly there. So maybe this is one of the biggest changes I've made is I made that banner a little bit more modern. So you must have probably seen this name here like 1,000 of times. This is like almost all websites look like this. So I wanted to switch it up a little bit so it's not just the boring old setup. So yeah. So I decided to again keep the image but move things around so that we have the welcome text on the left and then this department image on the right. So you have there the welcome message and then the text there and then the department image on the right. The next important thing I felt here was the news and events. Now you notice I decided to go away from this two-column layout because it's normally tricky to, if somebody is visiting this site and they land here, their focus keeps shifting from here to here, from here to here. It becomes very difficult for them to for you to guide them through the contents based on importance. So I decided to ditch this two-column layout and just have a single flow in website, which is more common and also more common because it creates a better flow of content and also helps get the user through the content from the most important to the maybe repeating ones or the least important parts of the website. So yeah, so the next important thing I felt was the news and events. So instead of having like a title news and events and then news and then events, I just added news and then events. And then because these are the latest news, I decided to just call it exactly that, latest news. So there you have it. So the latest news and then the news articles that were there, the title and the description, short description there. So normally, maybe a common thing to do here is normally to put some sort of not some sort of the news image here. Most news articles would have like an image that was captured that is associated with that news article. But again, like I said, I didn't really want to change the contents of the website too much. I wanted to stay as close to the content as possible. So I'm assuming these guys didn't have images associated with these articles. That's why they're not shown there. So I decided to not add something that wasn't existent. So yeah. But like I said, if you're doing like a website, most times you just have an image to associate with each article there. So now because I was changing from this setup here to articles that are standalone there as a standalone section, I felt like I had to suggest that these items were clickable, these news articles were clickable. So that's why I added the border around them. And to make sure that these sections are distinct looking, I introduced this background color here to act as a separator between sections. So in the past, you would find people using something like a line, or like you see I'm using this line here again. But it's not the most pretty thing to look at when you use lines. So there's this design tips you'll see here from this very wonderful designer guy called Steve. So he suggests one of his suggestions is here. You see, when you have too many borders here, it just becomes crazy cluttered. So you could normally a trick to use is normally to use white space and background colors to separate sections. When you can choose white space to separate sections, so for instance to separate search and these list items, you can really use white space because this is a very distinct section. So in those cases, you use a background color instead of borders. The same for this section of actions here for this card. So you use a background color. So yeah, so I decided to add a background color that separates those sections. Moving on to the upcoming events. So yeah, and the title is, I decided to just move from events to upcoming events because most of the time the events that will be shown here are events that haven't happened yet, that are coming. So I did the title to also reflect that. So that's why it changed from just events to upcoming events. And from there I just changed the background colors from just like that plain boring gray to a shade of that main color that was picked from their logo, and then also change the text colors to be a shade of that color too. So something maybe to notice here I forgot to mention is this text color here. Normally it's a common practice to just use grays to differentiate between to show hierarchy in maybe between a title and subtitle. So you make the subtitle gray, but gray doesn't really work with at least not well with colored backgrounds. Again, this is another thing you can find in this guy's suggestions here. So you'll see when you have a colored background, using a gray, it just looks off, just feels out of place. So normally a common practice to do is to find the shade of that color, or maybe tweak the hue a little bit to find a version of gray too. The plan is still the same, to de-emphasize the subtitle from the title, but when it's with colored backgrounds, you also need to use a shade of the color instead of just a regular gray. So that's what I did there. So that's why I'm not using like a regular gray there. I'm using a shade of that purple. The next thing is this highlight projects. So we had these highlights here, and then highlights projects, and then alumni, and then it just didn't connect for me. I felt like if we had the title as message here, it would have made maybe more sense. Highlights and then some explanation, and then project and then alumni. But instead of doing that, I just felt it made sense to just join that highlight projects and then maybe highlight alumni. So yeah, that's what I did. Call it highlight projects and then call those standout alumni. So yeah, the projects were a little bit sad looking, to be honest. So I did very few things, but I would imagine they would make them, you would see that they make them a little bit more noticeable. So I made the images a little bit larger, and I think not having this separator here, this 2-column layout, allows me to now have this image instead of being any. You can cutting somewhere around here, you can move it to go maybe to here. The other starts from there. So to make them stand out a little bit more, this are a little bit sad and small and not very standing out, especially since they are supposed to be highlight projects. So yeah. So there we have it. So we have the highlight projects there. I changed the title a little bit. Again, I'm using that sans serif 4-point font to as a section title there. And so yeah, we have the projects, and then I increased the title sizes, and then it's not really necessary to have this green here. It's just the black just works, because we're on a white background. The black text and the gray subtext there works really well to show this. And like I said, increasing the size, increasing the spacing here, removing that shadow, for me makes those stand out a little bit more. So yeah, the next section is the alumni. So I had a list of alumni here, and I felt that the things that could be done here was a common thing to do with people's faces is to put them in round circles, because as it were right here, it was looking a little bit too close to the highlighted projects. So I wanted to differentiate those two a little bit, the alumni from the projects. The alumni are people, and like I said, with people, it's a common practice to put people's faces in circles. So that's why you'd find like WhatsApp DPs or Twitter profile pictures, but almost everybody uses rounded shapes or circles to represent people's faces. So that's what I did, put the images in a circle to suggest that these were people. And then now, because with the rounded image, you can't really use the same layout we're using here. It's normally common practice again to move. They look better and cleaner when you move the images to the center, and with the images at the center, it also makes sense to center align this this text here, the text below it. So that's what I did. And then as a last thing, to make things stand out even more, there was this background here. The background was a little bit boring. It was like some version of gray. I wanted to make it a little bit more interesting, so I did some background, and then I did some pebbles, if you could call them, some pattern, a background pattern there, and then I introduced some sort of wave there, just to make it a little bit more interesting. So like I said, the first thing is to round off the images to make them look like images of people, because images of people are normally round or placed in circles in most places. So now when you round the images, this left aligned text looks a little bit weird. So something I like to do normally is to just center the image and center the text in that container. So that's what is going on here. So the images are now centered and the text is centered. Now this introduces another problem, which is all this white space around here. And to fix that, you could either put a border, but like I said a few minutes ago, borders are not the cleanest looking things in UI. So instead use a background. So I normally start my background with like a gray. And most days I probably would have ended here with just this gray background. I guess I had a little bit more time to play around with it, so I decided to maybe a step further. So I introduced this background, which is again from the logo, and another shade with that little this circular little thing here in the background. But then this looks a little bit like something is missing, just not there yet. So the last thing I do here is I introduce the border around the image to raise it up, make it stand a little bit more from the background, and also in the background I introduce patterns, some dotted patterns in there to make it a little bit interesting. And the last section was the contacts and the social network icons and the footer. Instead to put those together, contacts and social networks and footer normally just stay at the same place. So I did contacts, social networks, and then that copyright statement there. Yeah, so the final thing we're gonna do here is take a quick look at the before and the after. So this is how it started at. And this is what we finally have. Thank you for watching. Catch you next time.